The first thing I remember noticing about him was the smile. Not because it was friendly, not because it stood out in a good way, but because it didn't move. It was like someone had pressed pause on his face and forgotten to unfreeze it. At the time, I didn't know that smile would eventually be burned into my memory, replaying itself in my head years later, usually late at night when my house is quiet and my phone lights up with an unknown number. Back when I was 20, the summer before my senior year of college, I landed what I thought was the perfect internship. It was at a financial services firm downtown, the kind of place with mirrored windows, neutral carpet, and a receptionist who never looked up from her screen. The work itself wasn't exciting. Mostly data entry, spreadsheets, and sitting in front of a computer for 8 hours straight. But it paid well enough, and more importantly, it looked impressive on a resume. There were 8 interns total, including me. We were all packed into one open section of the office, with low cubicle walls that gave you the illusion of privacy without actually providing any. You could hear keyboards clicking, chairs rolling, and the occasional forced laugh from someone trying to make small talk. Most of the interns were easy to get along with. Normal college kids just trying to survive the summer. A couple of them joked around too much. One guy barely spoke at all. And another treated the internship like it was a life or death audition for CEO. Then there was Alex. When I first met him, nothing seemed immediately wrong. He was tall and thin, almost fragile looking, with pale skin and dark hair that always seemed slightly greasy no matter what day it was. He dressed appropriately, but never quite right, like his clothes didn't belong to him. He was quiet during orientation, nodded a lot, and avoided eye contact. The first few days passed without incident. We learned the software, met our supervisors, and settled into the routine. That's when Alex started showing up at my cubicle. The first time, I didn't think much of it. I was typing when I felt a presence behind me. I turned around and saw his head slowly rising above the cubicle wall, like he'd been crouching just out of sight. Because the walls were so low, it made him look unnaturally tall, almost stretched. He tilted his head and smiled. "Working hard? Or hardly working?" he said, dragging out each word in a slow, unnatural voice. I laughed awkwardly. The kind of laugh you give when you're not sure if something is supposed to be funny. "Yeah, something like that," I said, turning back to my screen. He didn't leave right away. He just stood there, leaning over the divider, watching me. I could feel his eyes on the side of my face. After a few seconds, he chuckled softly and walked away. I told myself he was just awkward. Plenty of people are weird during internships. I didn't want to be judgmental, but then it happened again and again. Every single day, sometimes more than once, I'd see that same head rise above my cubicle wall. Same frozen smile, same tilted head, same voice, like he was imitating something creepy on purpose. Sometimes he'd say things that didn't make sense, random phrases, half jokes with no punchline. Other times, he'd just stare at me in silence for a few seconds before laughing and walking off. What made it worse was that he only did it to me. The other interns noticed, but they thought it was some kind of inside joke between us. A few of them even teased me about my cubicle buddy. I laughed along, even though my stomach tightened every time I saw him approaching. As the weeks went on, his visits got longer. He'd lean over the divider and stay there, talking at me while I tried to work. If I stopped typing, he'd watch my hands. If I looked up, he'd hold eye contact just a second too long. Sometimes he didn't say anything at all. He'd just breathe softly and smile. I started making excuses, telling him I was behind on a report, pretending to get phone calls, wearing headphones without music playing. None of it worked for long. Then one night, everything changed. It was about 6 weeks into the internship. I was home eating dinner when my phone rang. The number wasn't saved. Normally, I ignore unknown calls, but I was expecting a delivery update, so I answered. "Hello?" There was silence. Not background noise, not static, just nothing. I was about to hang up when I heard breathing. Then a voice. "The tide's coming in," he said. "Better pull your boat out of the water." It was Alex, the same voice he used at the office, but louder, more intense, like he was performing for an audience that didn't exist. Then he laughed, a loud, unhinged laugh that went on for several seconds before the call abruptly ended. I stared at my phone, my heart racing. I had never given Alex my number, not once. I texted the number back, asking who it was. The message didn't go through. When I looked it up, it was a landline. That night, I barely slept. The following Monday, Alex wasn't at work. His desk was empty. His computer was gone. I asked my supervisor, Martin, if Alex could access intern contact information. He looked genuinely confused and said interns didn't have access to that kind of data. Then he told me Alex had been fired the previous Friday for not doing any work and ignoring multiple warnings. That's when I told him about the call. A couple of the other interns overheard and immediately started sharing their own experiences. Comments Alex had made, the staring, the way he lingered too long, they all admitted he'd made them uncomfortable too. Martin assured us Alex was gone and wouldn't be coming back. For about a week, nothing happened. I started to relax. Then, early one morning, around 5 a.m., I woke up with the feeling that someone was watching me. I looked out my window. He was standing in my backyard. Alex stood halfway between the trees and the porch light, staring up at my bedroom window. He didn't move. He didn't hide. He smiled. I heard him call my name in that same sing-song voice. Then he laughed. I screamed at him that I was calling the police. He stood there for another second before turning and walking into the trees, still laughing. The police couldn't do much. No threats, no break-in. I never saw Alex again. Years later, I still wonder how he found me. And sometimes, when my phone rings late at night, I still hear that laugh. The scariest part wasn't the text message itself. It was how casually it was sent, like a joke, like something he hadn't even thought twice about. I still remember staring at my phone, rereading the words over and over, hoping I was misunderstanding them. Okay, good luck changing your address. That was the moment I knew something was very wrong. But it didn't start that way. When I was 17, I got my first real job at a grocery store in a small Vermont town. The kind of town where nothing ever happened. No crime stories on the news, no scary rumors, just quiet streets, old houses, and familiar faces everywhere you went. The store itself was nothing special. One long building with sliding glass doors, a bakery that always smelled like sugar, and aisles that creaked when you walked down them. I worked as a cashier, usually evening shifts after school and longer hours on weekends. At first, I loved it. Most of my coworkers were friendly, especially the younger ones. During slow hours, we'd gather near the front registers and talk about TV shows, music, annoying customers, and whatever else helped pass the time. Depending on who was supervising, things were either strict or relaxed. When it was one of the younger supervisors, people checked their phones and joked around more. That's where I first noticed Sean. He worked in the dairy section. He was 24, quiet, and awkward in a way that didn't immediately raise red flags. He had long hair that looked like it was in the middle of growing out, never quite neat, never completely messy. He mostly kept to himself, stocking shelves or pushing carts of milk and yogurt into the cooler. We didn't talk much at work. Occasionally, we'd pass each other and nod. That was it. Then I got added to the employee group chat. It was mostly for shift changes and dumb jokes. Almost everyone under 30 was in it. I didn't think twice about joining. That's when Sean started messaging me privately. At first, it seemed normal. He asked about my schedule, which days I worked, whether I'd picked up an extra shift. I answered politely. He worked there too, after all. But over time, the messages changed. He started asking about what I did after work, what kind of music I liked, what shows I watched, if I'd gone anywhere fun over the weekend. The questions came one after another, always friendly on the surface, but oddly specific. Sometimes he'd call me cute, not outright inappropriate, but enough to make me uncomfortable. Especially because I was 17 and he was clearly older. I didn't want to make things awkward at work, so I tried to pull back without confronting him directly. I replied slower, shorter answers. Sometimes I didn't respond at all. That didn't stop him. He'd message late at night sometimes. Nothing explicit, just checking in, saying hi, making jokes that didn't really land. I told myself he was just socially awkward, that maybe he didn't realize how it came across. I didn't want to assume the worst. Then something happened that I couldn't explain. One night, I was home alone in my room, binge-watching Stranger Things. I was completely absorbed in it. I didn't text anyone about it, didn't post about it, didn't mention it to anyone at work. A couple days later, during a slow shift, a group of us were chatting near the registers about TV shows. Out of nowhere, Sean looked at me and said, "You like Stranger Things, right?" My stomach dropped. I froze for a second before nodding. I couldn't remember ever telling him that, or anyone at work. He smiled, not creepy, just knowing. Then he walked back to the dairy section like nothing had happened. I tried to brush it off. Maybe I'd mentioned it without realizing. Maybe someone else told him. But that night, lying in bed, I couldn't stop thinking about it. A few days later, I heard a noise outside my window. It was late. The house was quiet. At first, I thought it was the wind or a tree branch brushing against the glass. Then I heard it again. A light tapping. Not loud, not aggressive, just enough to make my heart start racing. I got out of bed and peeked through the blinds. There was nothing there. I told myself I was being paranoid, that old houses make noise, that my imagination was getting the better of me. But the uneasy feeling didn't go away. The next time Sean texted me, I finally said something. I told him clearly that I wasn't interested and that I wanted him to stop messaging me. There was a long pause. Then he replied, "Okay," he wrote, "good luck changing your address." I felt sick. I stared at the screen, my hands shaking. That wasn't a joke. There was no smiley face, no explanation. I didn't reply. Instead, I took screenshots of everything. I went straight to my manager and told him what had been happening. I showed him the messages. His face changed immediately. He told me not to worry and said he'd handle it. That same day, my dad took me to the local police station. I showed them the texts and told them about the tapping at my window. They took it seriously. The next day at work, Sean was called into the office. He never came back. The police helped us start the process for a restraining order. Knowing it was in place helped, but it didn't make me feel safe. For weeks, I barely slept. Every noise outside made my heart race. I checked the locks multiple times before bed. I stopped answering unknown numbers. I avoided talking about my routines with anyone. Even with the restraining order, the fear didn't just disappear. What scared me most wasn't that he had done something violent. It was how quietly everything escalated, how normal it all seemed at first. Eventually, the weeks passed without incident, then months. Nothing else happened. Life slowly returned to normal. But the experience changed me. Years later, I'm more careful, more aware, and I trust my instincts now, even when something seems small, because sometimes the scariest people don't look dangerous at all. I still don't know if the storm saved my life or almost ended it. All I know is that if the power hadn't gone out that night, I might never have realized how trapped I actually was. I was 26 when I started working at a small insurance office in rural Pennsylvania. It wasn't a dream job, but it paid the bills. The office sat behind a strip mall, tucked away where most people didn't even realize businesses existed. One floor, one long row of desks, flickering fluorescent lights that buzzed just loudly enough to be annoying. The smell of burnt coffee that never really went away. Most days were quiet. Phones rang occasionally. Printers hummed. People typed, filed paperwork, and counted down the minutes until 5 o'clock. I worked the day shift and usually left right on time. Nothing about the job felt dangerous or exciting. Until that Friday. There had been storm warnings all week, but nobody expected it to hit as hard as it did. When I woke up that morning, the sky was already dark, like the sun had decided not to show up. By mid-afternoon, the rain started coming down in sheets. Thunder shook the windows every few minutes. Lightning lit up the parking lot like a camera flash. Around 3 o'clock, management decided to send most of the employees home early before the roads flooded. I was about to pack up when my supervisor asked if anyone could stay late to help finish filing some client records. I hesitated, but I needed the overtime, so I agreed. Only one other person volunteered. His name was Tom. Tom had started working there about 2 weeks earlier. He was in his early 30s, tall, quiet, and difficult to read. I wouldn't call him friendly, but he wasn't rude either. He mostly kept to himself. What I noticed, though, was how often he seemed to be nearby. If I went to make coffee, he showed up a few minutes later. If I walked to the printer, he followed shortly after. I told myself it was coincidence. The office was small, after all. By 5 o'clock, the building was nearly empty. Just me and Tom. The storm outside had gotten worse. Rain hammered the roof so hard it sounded like gravel. Thunder rattled the walls. The parking lot lights flickered. We worked quietly for a while, the sound of typing mixing with the storm. Every now and then, I caught Tom looking in my direction. When our eyes met, he looked away. Around 6:30, the lights flickered once. Then again. The third time, the power went out completely. The office went silent. A few seconds later, the emergency lights kicked on, bathing everything in a dim orange glow. The storm outside sounded louder without the hum of electricity. I laughed nervously and said something about that being our sign to leave. Tom didn't respond. I heard the sound of keys jingling. Then the front door locked. I turned and saw Tom standing near the entrance, his hand still on the lock. He said it wasn't safe to go outside right now, that the storm was too bad, that we should wait. The way he said it made my stomach tighten. I grabbed my bag and jacket anyway, saying I'd just call someone to let them know I'd be late. When I pulled out my phone, there was no signal. I tried the landline. Dead. I told myself to stay calm. The power outage made the building feel smaller, darker, like the walls were closing in. When I turned around, Tom was standing in the doorway to the break room, holding a small flashlight under his chin. The light cast long shadows across his face, making his expression look twisted. He smiled. I forced a laugh and told him he scared me. Then I asked him again to unlock the door. He said it was better to wait. I walked back toward my desk, pretending everything was fine. My heart was pounding. I kept my movements slow and steady, afraid of setting him off. When I looked up again, Tom was gone. I decided that was my chance. Instead of going to the front door, I headed for the back exit near the storage room. That door led to a small lot where my car was parked. I grabbed the handle. It didn't move. I looked closer and felt my stomach drop. The door had been chained shut from the inside. We had never done that before. I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate. I panicked and ducked into the supply closet, closing the door quietly behind me. I crouched on the floor, holding my breath. The footsteps got closer. Then I heard Tom call my name. His voice was calm, gentle, like he was trying to reassure me. He said he just wanted to make sure I was safe. The beam of the flashlight slid under the closet door, lingering there for a few seconds before moving away. I stayed hidden, barely breathing. Then a loud crack of thunder shook the building. Rain roared against the walls. I realized water was dripping from the ceiling in the break room nearby. After what felt like forever, the hallway went quiet. I waited. 5 minutes. 10. Finally, I cracked the door open. The hallway was empty. I moved slowly toward the front of the office, ready to run if I saw him. When I turned the corner, I froze. The front glass door was shattered. Rain was blowing inside, soaking the carpet. Tom was gone. I didn't think. I ran. I sprinted through the broken doorway into the storm, slipping on the wet pavement, barely able to see. I reached my car, hands shaking so badly I could barely get the key into the ignition. I drove home without looking back. That night, I didn't sleep. The next morning, I called my manager and told him everything. He didn't believe me at first. Then he went to the office and saw the damage. The police were called. They searched the building. Tom's car was still in the parking lot, unlocked. His keys were on the seat. His wallet and phone were inside. The security cameras had been manually shut off before the power outage. Tom was never found. Some people said he must have had a breakdown. Others said he probably planned to hurt me. I quit the job a month later. Even now, during storms, I still feel trapped.